Howdy folks, this is Professor Ryan, and what we're going to talk about in this particular video is we are going to talk about the cost structure of businesses, or we're going to begin talking about the cost structure of a business and profit. Now, we already talked about profit in the last lesson. We talked about the profit equation, but we're going to start talking about how the cost structure of a business affects the profit of a business. And we're going to focus primarily on 5 concepts in this particular lesson. We're going to focus on, we're going to learn about a concept called marginal cost. We're also going to learn about marginal revenue. And then we're going to learn some of the averages. Remember, a few lessons ago we talked about the idea of marginal, total, and average. And so here's marginal, but now we're going to bring back in the idea of average. And average costs are a very important part of understanding businesses in economics. Okay, and so these 3 right here, these are the initials for what it is that we're going to learn about. But we're going to learn about average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. Now, you already have learned about what fixed cost and variable cost and total costs are. Now all we're going to do is we're going to find the averages of all those values. Okay, so let me just give you a quick introduction or a quick description of what is marginal cost and what is marginal revenue. Well, marginal cost and marginal revenue are related to total cost and total revenue. Okay, so if you understand total cost and total revenue, then you will be okay understanding marginal cost and marginal revenue. Also, marginal cost and marginal revenue are very similar to marginal utility. If you recall, marginal utility is the little bit more utility that you get when you consume one more item. So the word marginal basically means the little bit more when you have one more. So when you have one more, how much more of this other thing do you have? Okay? Now, when talking about businesses, what we're usually talking about, the one more, is usually, in most cases, the quantity that is produced by the business. So in this particular case, what you can see here is I've created a table, and I'm going to erase this stuff, and we're going to complete this table together. And what I've done is I've given you quantities that begin at 78 and go up to 87. So we're kind of in the middle of the production schedule for a business. So here's the thing. So marginal cost is concerned with how total cost is affected when a business produces one more unit. When the business produces one more unit, it costs more money to be able to produce that one more unit. And so the marginal revenue is the additional, or let's say it this way, the change in total cost when a business produces one more unit of output. So let's say they say, okay, well, we've already produced, we're producing 137 bicycles. Well, what if we produce 138? What if we go up by 1? How much will our costs go up by if we produce one more bicycle? Well, that would be the marginal cost of the 138th bicycle. Then, let's say they produce the 138th bicycle. Then they ask themselves, well, what if we produce 139? How much would our cost go up by if we produced one more bicycle? Well, that would be the marginal cost of the 139th bicycle. And although you might think that every single bicycle would cost exactly the same to produce, the truth is actually, as you continue to produce more and more and more, your marginal costs go up. So each bicycle costs a little more to produce than the previous one. Not that the individual bicycle costs more, but that the overall cost of the business goes up as you keep increasing production. Why? Well, remember the law of increasing opportunity cost? The idea that as you keep doing something, as you continue on a course of action, as you keep saying yes to the same decision, the cost of that decision increases as you keep saying yes to that decision. Okay? And so what you're going to see is that marginal costs, the change in total cost tends to get larger and larger and larger and larger and larger. Total cost will go up by 50, then it'll go up by 52, then it'll go up by 53, then it'll go up by 55. The jumps in total cost will get larger and larger and larger. That would be an increase in marginal cost. And we'll see that over here when we fill out this table. Okay? All right, marginal revenue. What is marginal revenue? Well, revenue is the money that's taken in by a business, right? That's how much money the business gets in the cash register when they sell more stuff, right? Well, marginal revenue is then going to be, if we sell one more, if we just sell one more, how much will our revenue go up? And usually you would think, well, the revenue would go up the same every time you sell one more. You know, if cheeseburgers are $2 and you sell one, your bank account, your cash register goes up by $2. Sell another cheeseburger, it goes up by $2 again. So you would think that marginal revenue is always the same because the price, your quantity times price would give you your total revenue. But you have to remember that in order to sell more, in order for your quantity to go up, think about a demand curve. Maybe we haven't covered demand yet, but if you're familiar with the demand curve, the idea of demand is in order to sell more, in order to get people to buy more, you have to lower your price. So usually as the quantity increases, the price decreases. And so marginal revenue, your total revenue will not always go up by the same jumps. It'll actually go up in smaller and smaller and smaller jumps. Marginal revenue tends to decline as a company sells more and more and more units. Okay? And we'll see that in this table here. So marginal revenue is the change in total revenue when a business when a business sells one more unit of output. And then of course what a business wants to do is they want to produce and sell their output. So when they produce the one more unit, that's going to increase their costs, and then when they sell that unit, that's going to increase their revenues. And so every time your quantity of production and sales goes up by one, you have an increase in cost and an increase in revenue, and whatever that increase in cost is, that's going to be your marginal cost, and whatever your increase in revenue is going to be from selling one more, that's going to be your marginal revenue. Okay? So that's marginal cost and marginal revenue. Now, so what I want to make sure that I said this. I know I said it in it, but I didn't write it down, so maybe you didn't write it down either, is that because of the law of increasing opportunity costs, marginal revenue tends to increase for a business. So as they produce more and more and more and more, their marginal cost. Oops, I put marginal revenue there. I meant marginal cost. Marginal cost. Marginal cost tends to increase as a company produces more and more and more. So as the quantity produced goes up, marginal cost tends to increase as well. On the other hand, because of the law of diminishing marginal benefit, or the law of diminishing benefit, every time we make a decision, there's some cost to it and there's some benefits. And we've already said several times that the benefits tend to decrease the more that you do the same thing. Just like utility, the more you eat more and more chips, the benefit of eating more chips goes down and down and down and down and down. Your marginal utility gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, that's the same thing over here. Marginal revenue is kind of like marginal utility, but for a business. And because benefits tend to decrease as you keep committing to the same decision, the same course of action, marginal revenue tends to decrease. Okay? So what we see here is that marginal cost tends to increase, marginal revenue tends to decrease. And this is these two concepts are very important in the conversation about the profit that a business earns. And we're not ready to have that conversation right now. We're probably going to have it in the next lesson, okay? But just understand for now what marginal cost is and that it tends to increase, and what marginal revenue is and that it tends to decrease, okay? So let's now, let's see. Let's go ahead and start filling in some of this table. Here's what I think you should do right now. I think you should pause this video, and in your notes, I think you should produce this table with the numbers that I've given you. Just pause the video and produce this table in your notes, and then we'll continue talking about this table, okay? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these different things, costs and revenues and profit and stuff like that. And you should already know how to calculate some of this stuff. But I want to start over here. Do you see this? FC, remember that's fixed cost, okay? So FC is fixed cost. Now, remember what we said in the last lesson? We said that fixed means not changing, right? And so a business, their fixed costs, they don't change, regardless of how much they produce. If they produce 0, they have to pay their fixed cost, the same amount. If they produce a lot, then they still have to pay the same amount of fixed cost no matter what. So, and what we have over here is, these are all possibilities. They're all different scenarios for a business. The business could produce 78 units, or they could produce 79 units, or they could produce 80 units, or 81, or 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, okay? A business cannot produce 78 units and produce 79 units. You can't do both. Now, you might say, well, when they produce 79 units, they're producing 78 units. Yes, I understand that. But if I ask them, how many did you make altogether, they would have to say, well, we made 79. And then I would say, well, so you didn't make 78, right? They said, no, we made 79. Okay, so the total amount. You can only have one total that you produced for a period, for a year, or for a month, or for a day, or for a week. Okay? And so, basically, the decision facing the business here is they have to decide, how many should we make? Should we make 81 of them? Or should we make 82 of them? And the main thing that should be leading that decision is whether they are going to profit or not. Which decision would give them the most profit? Just like utility maximization for a household or for an individual. They have to decide, well, how many of good X am I going to consume and how many of good Y am I going to consume? They have to decide, and the goal in making that decision is to get the most utility. Well, this business is trying to decide which quantity they should produce that would give them the most profit. Now, you might think that the more the better. That if these are all the choices, that if they want the most profit, then they should just go ahead and produce 87 or 88 or 89, as many as they can possibly produce. There are lots of managers in this world that think like that, but they shouldn't be thinking like that. That's a terrible idea, because here's what's happening. Is that the costs are going up, and the revenues are going up too, but the added revenue is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But the added cost is getting larger and larger and larger. And eventually what's going to happen is that the added cost is going to overtake the added revenue, and it's not going to make sense to produce any more. You're going to want to stop to make your profit as high as you can possibly make your profit. Okay. Now, if you're trying to maximize your revenues, then yes, I agree, we should be producing as much as possible. But we already said earlier in the semester, on the first day of class, we said that the goal of a business is to maximize profit, not to maximize revenue. Okay. So the main decision here, what they're trying to figure out here, what businesses are trying to decide is, what is the profit maximizing quantity? And so what we're going to do is we are going to fill out this table, and then after we fill out this table, we're going to look at the profit column and we're going to find the place where profit is at its highest point, and then that's the one that we're going to pick. Okay? All right, so fixed costs, I know I got off track. Fixed costs don't change. So at 78 units, the fixed costs are $4,600, and at 79 units, how much are fixed costs going to be? $4,900. Okay? And at 80 units, $4,600, I'm sorry. At 79 units, fixed costs are also going to be $4,600 because they're not changing. At 80 units, fixed costs are going to be $4,600. At 81 units, fixed costs are going to be $4,600. So just fill in $4,600 for all of these. So fixed costs are not changing because they're fixed, right? All right. Now, what we've already filled in here is we've got all the variable costs at different quantities, okay? So as you can see, variable costs are going up because variable costs are variable. They're changing, right? And what we learned in the last class is that total cost is equal to fixed costs plus variable costs. So all we have to do is add these two numbers together, and we will have our total cost. Okay, so you probably have to get a calculator and add this number plus this number, and I'm going to go ahead and fill it in right now, as a matter of fact. All right, so when you did all your addition, adding these two together, when you add these two together, it's 9835. Add these two together, it's 9957. Your number up here should be 9,600, and down here should be 10,752. So you can see, as the company produces more stuff, the total cost is increasing. Obviously. I mean, of course, if you're going to produce more stuff, you're going to have to pay out more money to be able to produce more stuff, right? And now that we have our column that shows all of our total cost, now we can start to understand marginal cost. Now remember, marginal cost is the increase in total cost from producing one more unit. So if we're already at 78 and we want to produce one more unit to 79, how much would our costs go up by? How much would total cost go up by? Well, it's going from 9,600 up to 9,716. So how much did cost go up by? Well, you can find that out by subtracting. 9,716 minus 9,600 is 116. So marginal cost, the marginal cost of the 79th unit is $116. If you produce a 79th unit, your costs will go up by $116. And so now you can finish filling in the marginal cost by simply taking, for the number that's going to go right here is going to be this number minus this number. So you're probably going to need a calculator. And so why don't you go ahead and fill in, do this number minus this number for here, then this number minus this number for here, then this number minus this number for here. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so if you did this correctly, these would be all the numbers that you would have in your marginal cost column. Okay, if you did this number minus this number, you should have 137, and this number minus this number is 140. Okay, all right, we're doing good. Now we're going to fill in the marginal revenue in the exact same way that we filled in the marginal cost. Now here's our total revenue column, and we don't have a price column, but I can tell you this, that because quantity is going up, price is going down. And we'll explain that another time. But basically the idea goes like this. When you go to the store, if they want you to buy more stuff, don't they have to lower their price? If you're happy with buying 2 of something, but they want you to buy a 3rd one, don't they have to lower their price for you to be willing to buy a 3rd one? And so generally speaking, there is a negative relationship between the price of a product and the quantity that people want to buy, okay? So, but basically this was and if you want to find out what the price is at each quantity, you can just divide the revenue by the quantity and you'll get the price, okay? But here's what's important right now, is that the marginal revenue is the increase in total revenue. So this company, if they sell 78 units, they will earn $17,160 in revenue. But if they sell 79 units, if they go up by 1 more, then they will earn $17,301. That's larger than this number. By how much? Well, we have to subtract. We have to do 17,301 minus 17,160. And if you did this in a calculator, you would get 141. So the marginal revenue, the added revenue from selling 1 more unit, is $141. So this business, if they produced 1 more unit, if they went from 78 up to 79, they would earn $141 more in revenue, and it would cost them $116 in additional total cost. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to fill in the rest of this column. You're going to do this number minus this number to get this number, then this number minus this number to get this number. Okay? So go ahead and fill that in now. Now, if you did it correctly, then these would be all the numbers that you have written down, okay? And so this number minus this number is 133, but then this number minus this number is 131. And here's what I want to point out to you. Over here, quantity is increasing. And I want you to notice, look at the marginal cost column. What is happening to the marginal cost as quantity increases? It's getting larger. The values, the output values, are getting larger and larger and larger as the quantity gets larger, just like I said before, because of the law of increasing opportunity cost. But what's happening to marginal revenue? Even though total revenue is going up, it's going up in smaller chunks. The marginal revenue is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as quantity increases, like I told you it would, like I said before what would happen, okay? And so now that we have that information, now we can fill in, well, we don't need marginal revenue to do profit, but to do profit, remember the profit equation, all we have to do is take total revenue minus total cost. So we're going to take 17,160 and subtract away 9,600. And if we did that, we would have 7,560. 7,560. So this business, if they produce 78 units, they will earn $7,560 in profit, okay? Can you go through the rest of the table and fill in the rest of the numbers? You're going to do total revenue minus total cost, total revenue minus total cost, total revenue minus total cost, just like the profit equation, okay? All right, so if you did it correctly, then these would be all the numbers that you would have. And I'm hoping that while you were calculating these numbers, maybe you noticed something very interesting that happened. And I don't want to talk about it right now, but we'll talk about it in just a couple minutes, okay? All right, so what you have now, we're not going to do these right now. We're going to come back to these in a few minutes. This is the average, these are the average costs, okay? So what we have here is, this basically shows only for a limited number of quantity, only from 78 up to 87. It shows the cost and the revenue structure of the business, okay? And here's what I want you to understand, is that the costs over here are affecting how much of the revenues that the business gets to keep, okay? And so now what I want to do is I want to go back to that question that we had asked. We said, what is the profit maximizing quantity of that this company should produce, right? And so here's what I want to do. I want to go through this column and I want to find out, where is profit the largest? Where is profit the largest? Well, look, is this profit larger than this? 7560 to 7585. Yep, it's going up, right? Profit's going up to 605, up to 620, up to 630, up to 635. And then what happens right here? What happens right there? The profit stays the same, right? It's 635 and then it's 635 again. Profit did not go up. And then what happens after that? 7630. What just happened here? Profit went down. And what that means is that if the business produces 84 units, they'll make 7,635 in profit. But if they produce one more unit, the costs will overtake the revenues in such a way that the profits will begin decreasing. Now, are they still earning a profit if they produce 85 units? Yeah, they're still getting 7,630. But they put extra effort, and now they're getting less profit. More effort, less profit. Why would they do that? Who would do that? Who would put extra effort into getting less? And therefore, this business should not, under any circumstances, produce that 85th unit. They should stop, and they certainly should not produce the 86th or the 87th unit, because that's just going to make their profit go down even more. They want the most profit that they can possibly get from producing. And these two numbers right here, here's their maximum profit, 7,635. So they should either produce 83 units or 84 units. In my opinion, they should go ahead and produce the 84th unit, because they'll get their, they'll get more of their product out there. They'll, their employees will get to work a little bit more. They'll generate just a tiny bit more of activity in the economy. So to me here, the profit maximizing quantity is going to be 84. And I want to show you something very, very interesting at that profit maximizing quantity. Look at the marginal cost at 84. What is the marginal cost at 84? Well, the marginal cost is 131. What is the marginal revenue at 84 units? Also 131. And so what's happened here is we have decided to produce a quantity where marginal revenue and marginal cost are equal to each other. Now, do you remember the utility maximizing rule number 2, which said that you should choose the mix, the combination of goods that balances out the ratio of the marginal utility? Well, look at this. That's basically what we're doing here, is we are balancing out the marginal benefit, the marginal revenue, with the marginal cost at 131. And that is generally the rule in economics, is that you will maximize a business will maximize its profit when it balances out its marginal revenue with its marginal cost. At 84 units, the added cost will be 131, and the added revenue will also be 131. And so they will not earn any more, and they will not lose any at all. And we'll go into more detail. We'll come back to this in the next lesson. We're going to go into much greater detail on this idea. But we can say, looking at this schedule here, that that the profit maximizing quantity is either 83 or 84. And I have other reasons why I can argue that 84 is actually the profit maximizing quantity, but I'm going to do that in the next lesson, okay? All right, so far so good. So you have learned about marginal cost, you have learned about marginal revenue, we have reviewed total cost and total revenue, we have reviewed profit, and now we have had our first look at how a business is able to maximize their profit. And if you recall, there are two main goals in microeconomics. One of them is for individuals and households, the other one is for businesses. Individuals and households want to maximize their utility, businesses want to maximize their profit. And so this is our first look at that microeconomic goal of businesses maximizing profit. Okay? All right. Now let's switch gears and let's go over to the averages. Okay? Now the averages are really easy to calculate, but understanding what they mean is a little more complicated. Okay? So let's go ahead and calculate, or let me show you how to calculate the averages. Okay? I'm going to give you a few formulas here. You should write these formulas down because you need to know how to do these calculations. If you want an average cost, okay, so let's say average fixed cost, okay? If you were to write it out, it would say average fixed cost. And we write it as AFC, but I don't want to write them all out. Just understand, you could write them all as average variable cost, average total cost, but we can just use these initials here, AFC, okay? Average fixed cost is the fixed cost per unit produced. That's what it is. It is the fixed cost per unit produced. So, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to allocate our costs over the units that we're producing so that we can understand, well, on average, how much did each one cost? We're trying, even though the marginal cost of each one is different, we want to give one number to all of them, and when we give one cost number to all of them, that's called the average cost. Okay, so the average fixed cost is the fixed cost per unit. Average variable cost, obviously, then is the variable cost per unit produced. Oops. Oh, gosh, I really hacked up that, didn't I? That was supposed to be a lowercase p. Okay. And then average ATC is average total cost. That is the total cost per unit produced. Per unit produced. And these are very useful numbers. They're very useful ideas. They help us to make decisions. And you'll see in the future, we're going to come back to these a lot in the rest of the semester. We're going to see average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost a lot. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you a few formulas. Okay? So I hope you wrote these down. So, to calculate each one of these, average fixed cost, all you have to do is divide fixed cost by quantity. That's it. Just divide fixed cost by quantity. And so here, if we wanted to know the average fixed cost for 78, we would just do fixed cost 4,600 divided by 78. And whatever 4,600 divided by 78 is, that would be the average fixed cost. In the very same way, average variable cost is equal to the variable cost. Oops. Rewrite that equal sign. Divided by quantity. And then average total cost is total cost divided by quantity. And so here's what I want you to understand. I'm going to give you a little aside here just for a second. Let's say that you knew average fixed cost and you knew quantity. Well, then you could find the fixed cost. All you'd have to do is multiply quantity on both sides, multiply average fixed cost times quantity, and you would have fixed cost. Similarly, if you knew fixed cost and you knew average fixed cost, you could divide fixed cost by average fixed cost, and that would give you quantity. So as long as you have any two of those values, you could get the third one. Okay? All right, so that's my aside. All right, so average fixed cost, this is the formula for average variable cost and formula for average total cost. Now I have one more formula for average total cost. Average total cost is also equal to average fixed cost plus average variable cost. If you were to add the average fixed cost and the average variable cost together, that would give you the average total cost. And I'll show you why that works. Because average total cost is total cost divided by quantity equals average fixed cost is fixed cost divided by quantity plus average variable cost is variable cost divided by quantity. And look, we have a common denominator here. So if we were to add these two fractions together, common denominator means we just bring it over, Q, and then we add the numerators together, fixed cost plus variable cost, fixed cost plus variable cost. Well, what is fixed cost plus variable cost? That's total cost. We learned that in the last lesson, right? So it is true that you can get average total cost by adding up average fixed cost, and average variable cost. And I'll show you in just a minute that that is true, that that's how it works, okay? So what I want to do right now, we're going to talk a little more about these average costs and just after we fill in the table, okay? So I just want to know that you are capable of making these calculations. Let's do the first one together. I'm going to go get a calculator. Let's do the first one together, maybe the first two together, and then I think you'll be able to calculate the rest of them on your own. So the average fixed cost here is going to be 4,600 fixed cost divided by quantity, divided by 78. So 4,600 divided by 78. Now, I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. So this is going to be 58.97. 58.97. And what that means is $58.97 per unit produced. So you can assign $58.97 to each one of these 78 units produced. So hopefully you're charging more than $58.79 for each one of those that you sell so that you can cover your fixed costs. Okay? Variable costs, we're going to take our average variable cost, we're going to take our variable cost, 5,000, and we're going to divide that by 78, and that's going to give us $64.10. $64.10. And so now, average total cost, there's 2 ways we can get average total cost. We can either divide total cost by 78, or we can add together average fixed cost and average variable cost. So if I add these two together, I get, well, it's going to be a little weird because it rounds differently. If I added them, it would be $123.07, $123.07. But if you look at, if we were to divide it, if we were to do 9,600 divided by 78, then we would get rounded, it would be 8 cents instead of 7 cents. I want you to see that, right? It's $123.08 instead of 7 cents. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 8 cents because I want to do the calculation by dividing, but it doesn't matter that we're just a penny off. That's not that big of a deal for our analysis up here, okay? Let's do the next one together. Why don't you go ahead and calculate this one and then I'll do it. All right, so 4,600 divided by 79. Notice that our numerator is not changing. We keep dividing by 4,600. Why is it always 4,600? Because it's fixed. It's a fixed cost. Divided by 79 gives us 58.23. What just happened? 58.23. What happened to our average fixed cost? Didn't it just go down? It went down. Why did it go down? Because we're dividing the same number by a larger number. The denominator is getting larger, and when the denominator gets larger in a fraction, the value gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? So 58.23. Now to get the average variable cost, we're going to do 51.16 divided by 79. And we get 64.76 rounded. 64.76. Now what just happened to average variable cost? It went up. It went from 64.10 to 64.76. Now, will average variable cost always go up? Most of the time it will. The truth is about the average variable cost curve is, you want to write this down. Next to average variable cost, write down what I'm about to say, okay? Average variable cost has kind of, if you were to graph it, it has kind of a U shape. It starts out going down, and that's when the business is experiencing economies of scale, but then eventually average variable cost starts to go up. Most of the average variable cost curve is increasing, not decreasing, okay? All right, so what we're going to see here, since it increased from here to here, we know that it's just going to keep increasing. After it starts increasing, it does nothing but increase after that, okay? What about average total cost? Well, we're going to divide 97.16 divided by 79. And that's going to give us 122.99. 122.99. Now, what happened to average total cost? It went from 123.08 down to 122.99. It decreased. average total cost decreased, which is interesting, and I'll tell you why it's interesting. Because average total cost tends to increase for most of production. It tends to increase. But just like average variable cost, average total cost also decreases first and then increases. So it looks like we caught the average total cost curve on the decreasing portion of its curve. Okay? Now what might happen is, as we calculate through here, average total cost may change direction. It may go down and then it may start going up. And let's find out. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the video and I want you to calculate the other 8 average fixed costs, the other 8 average variable costs, and the other 8 average total costs. Okay? Go. All right, so these are the numbers that you should have if you did your calculations correctly, and I really hope you did the calculations, because you're really going to hurt on learning if you didn't do the calculations. This is how we learn, is we do the work. Okay? We run the calculations, and then we look at the patterns and we understand. So let's look at the patterns here. Like I said, is average fixed cost doing what I said that it would do? Yes, it's decreasing. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. What if this company produced 5,000 units? 5,000 units. Then we would divide 4,600, its fixed cost, by 5,000, and we would get 92 cents. They're distributing the cost, their fixed cost, over more and more and more and more units. That's good for the business. It's good for the business to disperse its fixed cost over as many units as it can possibly produce. Okay? So we want to see this happen. But also I want to show you here what's happening to average variable cost. Well, as I said, it's increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. The reason it keeps increasing, so watch this. The variable cost per unit that is produced is getting larger and larger and larger. That means it's becoming more expensive to produce more units. If we want to make more, it's going to be more expensive, and then more expensive, and then more expensive. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen this yet, but if you're familiar with supply and demand, this is one of the reasons why the supply curve is upward sloping. A business will only produce more if they can charge more. Why do they need to charge more to produce more? Because to produce more, it's becoming more expensive. Their variable costs are getting larger. Write that down. Write, in order to produce more, the business has to pay out more per unit and they have to charge more per unit. They have to increase the price in order to make more stuff. Why? Because their variable costs are increasing. And just so you know, the reason their variable costs are increasing is because their marginal cost is increasing. They're related to each other. Now, lastly, here's the interesting thing that you're going to see. We're adding average fixed cost plus average variable cost, and that equals average total cost. Well, average fixed cost is going down. Average variable cost is going up, getting smaller, getting larger. So we're adding together a number that's getting smaller with a number that's getting larger. So what's going to happen over here in average total cost? Let me explain. Here's what's going to happen. Is that the average fixed cost is going to have a stronger effect on average total cost at first, because the drops are going to be larger. Okay? We're dropping here. Let's see. We're dropping by 76 cents. Then we drop by 73 cents. Then we drop by, let's see, 71 cents. See, the amount that we're getting smaller by is getting tinier and tinier and tinier. Okay? And so the effect of the drop in average fixed cost is only going to, the drop is only going to affect average total cost for a little while. But the increases in average variable cost are going to get larger and larger and larger and larger, and they're going to take over and have a larger effect on average total cost than average fixed cost. And so what will ultimately happen is, at first, average total cost will get smaller. But then, average total cost will begin to get larger. And you can see it happen here. Look, 123.08 down to 94, down to 93. And what happens right here, right there? Average total cost starts going up, 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 up. Average total cost actually reached a minimum right here at 122.93. So if this business produces 81 units, they will have their lowest average total cost over their entire production. And so what we can say is that at this line right here at 81 units, average fixed cost loses its effect on average total cost, and average variable cost takes over the effect on average total cost. Okay. Actually, what I'm going to do is for the last part of this lesson is I'm actually going to switch over to my computer and put my headset on, and I'm going to show you an image on my computer, and I'm going to explain. I'm going to show you how average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost are related to each other. Okay. And so we'll finish up the lesson there. Okay. So what we're going to look at here is a graph of average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. And do you see this dollar sign in the upper left-hand corner? This is actually supposed to be dollars per unit. So this is actually supposed to be dollars over quantity. Okay, so this is the per unit cost of producing. So fixed costs do not change, okay? And so at smaller here's quantity over here on the horizontal axis. So at smaller quantities over here, we're dividing by a smaller number. Therefore, at smaller quantities, fixed costs per unit are going to be higher because they're spread over fewer units. So, so this curve right here, this is the average fixed cost curve, is going to be higher on the left. But as our quantity increases, we're dividing by a larger number, and so average fixed cost is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's going to keep getting closer and closer and closer to this horizontal axis. It's never actually going to become zero, but it's going to become so small that it's like zero, and that's what we would like to have. So at larger quantities, fixed costs per unit are lower because they're spread over a greater levels of output, greater number of quantity. Now, average variable cost, on the other hand, it starts out going down a little bit. So average variable cost declines at first because of economies of scale. Okay, but then eventually average variable cost hits a minimum point and then begins to increase. Average variable cost turns upward due to the law of diminishing returns, or the law of increasing opportunity cost. Okay, so average variable cost starts out going down, but then really starts going up. Where over on, if we see both of them together here, you can see that average fixed cost tends to decrease as quantity increases, but average variable cost increases as quantity increases. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to throw in the average total cost. Now remember that average total cost is average fixed cost plus average variable cost. So if we're adding both of these together, we know that average total cost will need to be above both of the curves. And there it is. So there's our average total cost. It is the sum of average fixed cost and average variable cost. Now notice that the average total cost curve is U-shaped. It's on the left side, average total cost is falling because average fixed cost has a stronger effect on average total cost. So because average fixed cost is really high, it's pulling up the average cost. But then as average fixed cost gets lower and lower and lower, average total cost gets lower and lower and lower. But then there's going to be a point right down here where average variable cost, see on the right side of the U, average total cost rises because average variable cost has a stronger effect on average total cost and pulls up the average total cost. So it starts out going down, because of average fixed cost, but as quantities get really large, average total cost starts going up because of average variable cost. Okay. All right, now I want you to notice here that the difference between average fixed cost and average total cost, this distance right here, is the same as average variable cost, because we know that total cost is average fixed cost plus average variable cost. And this distance right here from 0, this is the height of the variable cost. We're going to shift that upward and put it right here. And so the distance, if instead of counting from 0, we count up from average fixed cost, this is where average variable cost ends, added to average fixed cost. And so when you add average variable cost to average fixed cost, you get average total cost. And you can see the same thing again over here, as the difference between average variable cost and average total cost is the same as average fixed cost. This distance is the same as this distance right here, okay? Note that the difference between average variable cost and average total cost is equal to average fixed cost, okay? So I'm just showing that basic idea to you, okay? And so if we put the whole thing together, this is what we get. These are all your notes that you have to understand, that average fixed cost decreases as quantity increases. Average variable cost at first decreases, but then really tends to increase as quantity increases. And that average total cost first decreases because of average fixed cost, then increases because of average variable cost. And that's pretty much the whole explanation, or everything that you need to know about average costs in a business. And if you understand these things, then we can now carry them forward and understand more about businesses because we understand these average costs.